What's this podcast, Waterbury Talks? Who's running this? Introduce a new podcast series, the Waterbury Talks.
Hold on, I'm live already. Usually takes longer than this. Let me turn it down. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Waterbury. This is not an official podcast about a specific subject like we usually do. I'm not an expert on this, by the way. I just want to talk a little bit about the new cannabis law, the businesses that surround it, and the moratorium that exists in Waterbury, Connecticut. The moratorium, I got to refer to my other screen over here because, again, I'm not an expert on this, but I did want to bring up the subject. And while I'm thinking about that, my cousin Reggie Beeman always says, why you got to be the one to bring up everything? That's probably a really good question. I just know in this case about this thing, I'm not hearing any conversation around it. So I want to start with what the actual law is. So the actual law is Senate Bill number 1201, an act concerning responsible and equitable regulation of adult use cannabis. Essentially, and if there's anybody out there that wants to weigh in, they can. Essentially, in the state of Connecticut, that legalizes the use of cannabis for adults. Cannabis, if you're just thinking in small terms, then you're thinking about people that smoke marijuana, that smoke weed, which is that's a good portion of it, but there's a lot more to it. I'm not going to get real deep into the philosophical differences about what people think should be legal, what shouldn't be legal. The fact that it is legal puts all that aside. It's moot. Doesn't matter. So what's special, what's different about this law? So this law has a component to it that is called social equity piece. Social equity portion was written into this law so that once this thing became legal, once this substance became legal, that people who were disproportionately affected and the communities that were disproportionately negatively affected by the so-called war on drugs and the inequitable sentences that were handed down to people of color, basically. The law was written so that those very people and their families would be able to take advantage of making money and bringing resources into the very same communities that were damaged. That makes sense? It's instead of having this law become legal, having substance become legal, having cannabis become legal, and then a whole bunch of rich people come in here and continue to take advantage of us and make money off of our community, even as some of our friends, family, and loved ones still languish in jail. The law was written in such a way that 50%, a full half of these licenses have to go to what's called social equity applicants. That could be you, could be me, could be anybody that falls within the guidelines. There's a lot to the guidelines, but the basics of the guidelines are that you need to fall within a certain lower income bracket, and you need to live in the disproportionately affected census tracts. So there's a whole bunch of formulas that they go through and that they use to determine who's eligible. So there are 3 ways to get one of these licenses. Now, I want to get deep into this, but I want to get to the moratorium part about how Waterbury and people of color and Black folks in particular are going to miss out on yet another opportunity because this city can't bring itself to be progressive for the good of the people in the city. You can get one license through what's called Section 149. If you are a large investor, someone with a lot of money, you can buy one of these licenses for $3 million, but you still have to find a social equity partner. That's a big ticket. The next possibility is there are 4 existing growers already in Connecticut who have been engaged in the sale of medical marijuana through dispensaries. Those companies have a right to expand into other portions of the business. And if they find a social equity applicant like me or you, or someone that lives in this census tract, then they can apply for what's called an EJV, which is an equity joint venture. Those licenses are $1.5 million invested in by the existing multi-state grower. And the the social equity partner must be a 50% owner of that license. Let me back up real quick to Section 149. Section 149, the social equity partner has to be a 65% owner of the company with control and at the head of the organization. So the EJV is half that money and a 50% stake. Now, there's one other possibility, which is the one that most people have access to, because most people don't know people with $3 million or can't get into a partnership with these multi-state growers, because multi-state growers are already ahead of the game. They've already been looking at this once they knew the law was coming down. So the other possibility is through a lottery. You have a general lottery, and you have a lottery for social equity applicants. If I'm not mistaken, see, this is the part where I'm not sure. I got my stuff up here. You can put in as many applications into the lottery as you can afford to put in, as long as you are a qualified applicant. Um, so I believe, do you know how much they were? Were they 500 per? They were $500 a piece. You can put in as many. So that's like you buying as many lottery tickets as you possibly can to have the biggest stake and the biggest possibility of getting one of these licenses. Now, I'm gonna get to the moratorium part because I'm here doing our classes and I got other things to do. But these things need to be discussed and talked about. So the possibilities for licenses are retailer, micro cultivator, delivery service, hybrid retailer, food and beverage, product packager, product manufacturer, and transporter. Out of all of those licenses, 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, in excess of 20 of those licenses will be drawn out of this lottery, and they will go to social equity applicants. Once you get this license, you are free to open a business in whatever business section you put in and were designated to. There's a lot more that goes to this, and we'll cover some other things I'm going to have some experts on. But here's the thing about the moratorium. Remember, long time ago, when George Floyd was killed, when George Floyd life was extinguished by the knee of a police officer, and everyone got on our social equity horse, and we said everything's going to be different now. Is everything different? The reason that I brought that up is because even here in Waterbury, Connecticut, there were a lot of protests, a lot of outrage. And one of the central figures and points of this outrage was a Christopher Columbus statue downtown that sits outside City Hall right now. Around after a lot of the protests around the country, a lot of these statues were pulled down, brought down, in the interest of people trying to find some common ground, when it comes to understanding cultures. Ours still sits there. I wish I could ask somebody in real time, do they know why it still sits there? That statue still sits there because after much discussion, after much protest, and after much hubbub, what ended up happening was that the mayor didn't make a decision about it. The zoning board didn't make a decision about it. The Unico Club, the people who put it there, didn't make a decision about it, and the Board of Aldermen didn't make a decision about it. Mainly because none of them had to. And for any one of those entities to make a decision about removing the statue would cost them some kind of way. It would cost them with their people, it would cost them with their constituents, it would cost them with political office or political capital. So no one made the decision. So what they did, which is a smart thing to do politically, is they put it on a voting referendum. So every registered voter in the city of Waterbury had the opportunity, when voting in the last mayoral election, to vote to have that statue removed. Now, think about all of the people who were outraged and wanted that statue gone and protested the whole summer. But when it came time to vote in the moratorium, there weren't enough votes to remove the statue. How can that be? How can that be? Where was the disconnect? So the reason why this is important and why this is why you got to pay attention to a moratorium and what is in your interest is this. This law was written so that poor Black people that live in certain areas that have been affected in certain ways could take advantage of being in business, in the very business of the laws, the laws that were focused to disproportionately affect us, to hurt us. And this is an opportunity for people of color here. But the powers that be, for whatever reasons they have, and I ain't mad at anybody because it could have been a simple it could have been a simple vote by the zoning board, or the board of aldermen could have allowed it or whatever. But as I stated earlier, there's political disadvantages to taking a stand. So they put it up for a vote in this November's election, which is November the 3rd, Nadine?
Yeah.
November the 3rd. On the ballot will be a question on whether or not to lift the moratorium in the city of Waterbury, so that cannabis industry and all of those different types of businesses that I was talking about, not just people walking around smoking weed, retailer, micro cultivator, delivery service, hybrid retailer, food and beverage, product packager, product manufacturer, transporter, all of those possibilities of businesses opening that, as you can see, center around many other things besides people just rolling up weed and smoking it. We're talking about multi-million-dollar industries, and Waterbury, for whatever reason, has decided to shut us out of those possibilities and those opportunities and leave it up to a vote. So now, again, can't be mad at nobody, because once again, like the statue, is put in our own hands. And it just so happens that there are people in Waterbury who have procured some of these licenses. And you know what the hit is? They can't open up shop here and hire you at good paying jobs, hire your kids at good paying jobs, hire your families at good paying jobs, hire the people who actually went to jail behind this for good paying jobs. Can't do it because somebody decided, we don't like it. So there are a lot of good reasons to have this industry. I don't partake specifically, but the thing is, people hear the word cannabis and they think only about one aspect. But, and I'm not going to get deep into the science here, but what we have that is tied to our our central nervous system is an endocannabinal system that can be altered and can be helped and enhanced by different derivatives of this plant. Whether it be anxiety, pain management, appetite control, whole host of things that go along with these industries and these types of sections of the industries. All of that is being dismissed. by the powers that be here. For whatever reason, they don't want it, they don't like it, whatever. They think it's going to change the quality of their life here. But the fact is, we're going to get left behind. And here's why we're going to get left behind. There was no ban in Seymour, Connecticut. There was no ban in Naugatuck, Connecticut. There's no ban in Meriden, Connecticut. There is no ban in New Haven or Bridgeport. So you can, in the city of Waterbury, you can keep the moratorium on, but you're not going to keep the product out of the city. So the only thing that's going to end up happening is the city is going to lose out on revenue that will be generated by the companies themselves. It's going to lose out on revenue that will come from the state, from a state fund that will be put into place not just by taxes but other money. And then some of this other folks can speak to in detail. The only thing that's going to happen is the people who this law was meant to support and meant to take advantage of will be cut out of the money trail. Now, I don't know if that's intentional on anybody's part, but it doesn't matter because we have the ability to vote for it. So, like the Christopher Columbus statue, we say one thing, get on social media, we got a lot to say, we got a lot to complain about, bitch about, whatever. But a lot of times, these things are in our hands. And one of the reasons I'm bringing it up is because I haven't heard anything about it at all. People maybe think that this is just just a law that says you can walk around, smoke weed, and not get arrested. But it's so much more than that. So, Waterbury leaders have decided to put this up for a vote. Now, what you got to understand about moratorium votes and referendums is that the language that they are written is very specific. And you have to pay close attention to the wording of the question, or it'll have you voting the opposite of the way that you think you're voting. You know, if you don't want these businesses in your town, then just know that all of the advantages that will come from Black people in poor neighborhoods owning companies that they can train people for will be lost, and the marijuana will still be here. So we're gonna do some more of these. This was just off the cuff. We're gonna have some experts, somebody from the Social Equity Council, to come and explain all of the advantages to having these businesses in the very neighborhoods that have been disproportionately damaged and destroyed by the laws that came before this. I think that's about as much as I am qualified to speak on at the moment, and we'll be back.